Keir Starmer just went through a painfully awkward moment, facing boos and open humiliation from an angry crowd. What was supposed to be a motivating speech quickly spiraled into something far more uncomfortable. Instead of applause, it triggered frustration, disbelief, and outright outrage. So the real question is simple. What did he say that turned cheers into jeers? Let's break it down. There was a time when Starmer was seen as a rising force within the Labour Party, a figure of promise, a leader many believed could steady the ship, but those days now feel distant, almost forgotten. Watching him today feels less like seeing a confident leader in control, and more like watching a once great player who's completely lost their form. The trouble really began during his visit to Southport. When Starmer arrived, he likely expected a supportive reception. After all, he's the leader of the Labour Party. But instead of warmth, he walked straight into a reality check he clearly wasn't prepared for. The moment he began speaking, the atmosphere changed. The energy drained from the room almost instantly. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eyes darted around. Quiet exchanges said everything words didn't, as if the crowd was collectively asking, "Is this really happening?" The reaction was impossible to miss. Disbelief turned into disappointment, and disappointment quickly became frustration. The room grew tense, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable. What made it even more striking was the comparison many couldn't ignore. This wasn't the first Labour event held in Southport. When Jeremy Corbyn spoke there, crowds listened intently, hanging on every word. But with Starmer, it felt very different. Less like a leader connecting with supporters, and more like a performer failing to land the punchline. And in that moment, the disconnect between leader and audience couldn't have been clearer. Then it happened. The first loud boo cut through the room. It was sudden, sharp, and impossible to ignore, like a dam finally breaking. The timing couldn't have been worse. It came right as Starmer was laying out his economic plan, confidently explaining how it would supposedly turn the country around. Instead of applause, every sentence landed in dead silence. No clapping, no encouragement, just an awkward pause after each line. The crowd looked bored at best and irritated at worst. Even the Labour MPs sitting behind him seemed visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as if hoping the moment would pass. One MP appeared to hide behind his notepad, pretending to review notes that didn't need reviewing. Another was glued to her phone, scrolling as though it were her only escape. They didn't have to say a word. Their body language said everything. This wasn't just going badly, it was a full-blown disaster. And yet, Starmer pushed on. He continued outlining his economic policies, speaking with the confidence of someone who believed he was delivering a masterclass. But the room wasn't buying it. Then, from the back, a single voice rang out again. A loud, unmistakable boo. It felt like that person had said what everyone else was thinking. From that moment, the floodgates opened. Groans followed, more boos echoed across the room. Nearly every point Starmer made was met with open frustration. Before long, people began quietly leaving their seats. Some headed for the exits without looking back. Others shook their heads as they walked away. The atmosphere had shifted completely. It was a humiliating moment for Starmer and his Labour team, but somehow it still managed to get worse. Within minutes, the tension turned into outright hostility. Disappointment hung heavy in the air, thick and unmistakable. Perhaps the most striking detail of all was Starmer's expression. He looked genuinely stunned, almost frozen, as if it had never crossed his mind that the crowd could turn on him so openly, so publicly. In that moment, the gap between leader and supporters was laid bare for everyone to see. But let's be honest for a moment. Much of this was self-inflicted. Starmer seemed to forget one of the most basic rules in politics: know your audience. In Southport, he missed that mark entirely, right from the start. The whole event felt like a slow-motion train wreck, the kind that leaves you wondering how someone can climb so high in politics, only to stumble so publicly. Starmer walked in believing he was the main attraction. He walked out looking more like the punchline of a bad joke. And this goes far beyond one badly received speech. The roots of this backlash run much deeper. Think back to 2016. Starmer was one of the most vocal champions of a second referendum. He pushed hard for the Remain cause, arguing passionately that the public deserved a final say on the Brexit deal. For years, that position defined him. Then, almost overnight, the message changed. During his Southport speech, Starmer told the audience that Labour needed to move on from Brexit. But the room wasn't buying it. The tension was unmistakable, thick in the air, like a kettle ready to boil over. On the surface, it may have looked like an attempt to appeal to Brexit voters. But in doing so, he alienated his own core supporters. Pro-Remain Labour voters felt betrayed. To them, it sounded like abandonment. Like the party was asking them to forget a fight they had been told mattered deeply. The reaction was immediate. The crowd wanted answers, not slogans. Starmer was interrupted 5 separate times while talking about Brexit. This wasn't polite disagreement. This was open resistance. Each interruption felt stronger than the last, turning the speech into something closer to a confrontation than a rally. The look on Starmer's face said it all. He appeared genuinely stunned, unable to grasp why his own supporters were pushing back so forcefully. But this isn't just about him. Labour as a party has been quietly drifting away from its pro-Remain identity, and unsurprisingly, many supporters aren't happy about it. Party members have taken to social media to voice their anger and confusion. And it raises a fair question. Why would a party you backed with loyalty and conviction suddenly tell you to move on from one of the biggest political decisions of a generation? This isn't simply a policy problem. It's a leadership problem, a crisis of trust. And unless Starmer can pull off something close to a political miracle, Labour could be heading straight toward an electoral disaster. So the real question remains, can Labour recover from this, or are they destined to crumble under the weight of Starmer's missteps? One thing is certain. The future of the party has rarely looked this uncertain. If you enjoyed this political discussion, this Southport episode really highlights just how precarious things have become for Starmer and the Labour Party. What was meant to be a speech to inspire confidence ended up exposing a deep disconnect between the leader and his base. Watching the audience's reaction unfold, shifts in seats, whispered exchanges, sudden boos, was almost painful to witness. It wasn't just a few disgruntled voices, it was a visible collective expression of frustration. The fact that even MPs sitting behind him were visibly uncomfortable only added to the sense of unease. This wasn't just a misstep, it was a moment that crystallised years of growing tension between Starmer's leadership approach and the expectations of Labour supporters. One of the most striking aspects is how the crowd's reaction seems directly tied to trust, or rather, the erosion of it. Many in Southport, particularly pro-Remain voters, have long identified Starmer as a champion of a final say on Brexit. That position helped define his image as a principled, steady hand in a party that has struggled with internal divisions. Yet in his speech, Starmer suggested that Labour needed to move on from Brexit. To some, this sounded less like pragmatism and more like betrayal. A clear, unambiguous message that had once galvanised supporters was suddenly replaced by ambiguity, leaving people feeling abandoned. It's a stark reminder that in politics, timing and consistency matter just as much as policy. When voters feel ignored or misled, even a confident delivery can't mask the disconnect. The broader context also matters. Labour as a party has quietly shifted its stance in recent years, and it appears the leadership has underestimated how deeply some of its core supporters care about issues like Brexit. It's not just about policy disagreements. It's about identity, loyalty, and the sense that a party you've stood by for years might no longer represent your values. The Southport speech made that tension impossible to ignore. Each boo and groan wasn't merely a reaction to one economic policy or another. It was a culmination of growing frustration, unaddressed grievances, and a feeling that leadership has lost touch with its base. This episode is a wake-up call. For Starmer and his team, it's no longer enough to rely on polished speeches and confident rhetoric. They need to actively rebuild trust, listen to supporters, and demonstrate that the party's direction reflects the people who have supported it through thick and thin. Otherwise, moments like Southport won't just be embarrassing. They could signal a much deeper political crisis. The question now isn't just whether Starmer can win back hearts and minds, but whether Labour can avoid a slow drift toward irrelevance if the party continues to misread its own supporters. Southport wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a leadership crisis. And unless it's addressed thoughtfully, strategically, and transparently, the repercussions could be felt far beyond one awkward, boo-filled speech.